NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, we got a bit to talk about in this episode. A lot of things to digest and a lot of things to look at and discuss and so on and so forth. We obviously got to talk about that 76ers game, how fantastic it was. We got to talk about Kyrie Irving and all his, things, dropping 50 points against the Hornets and his great defense against Harden. So many things we got to talk about. So let's dive right in. So since my last NetsBoy episode, the Nets played 3 games. They started off with a disappointing loss to the extremely improved and dangerous Boston Celtics. They lost 126 to 120. It was a game that Jason Tatum scored 54 points and was just phenomenal. And I spoke to my one buddy after the game who was like all discouraged from that game and said, this is terrible. Kyrie was there. It was Kyrie, KD. They lost to the Celtics. I don't know what this team is not what I think it is, blah, blah, blah. And I had to calm him down. I said, let's put this in perspective here. First and foremost, in basketball, as we know, anyone can beat anyone on any given night. What you got to do is you got to look at how that game happened. How did the Nets lose that game? And the reality of the situation is Durant was average at best in that game. Kyrie Irving did not play well. The role players, non-existent. And despite all of that, it took a 54-point performance by Jason Tatum for the Celtics to beat the Nets by only 6. Now, why do I bring this up? I don't care what some analysts say, cough, cough, Kendrick Perkins, who obviously is Boston Celtics biased. I'm personally, as a Nets fan, if Kyrie's a full-time player by the playoffs, I'm not afraid of the Celtics. I'm not. I think in a 7-game series, the Nets would probably have beaten the Celtics. With the way those rosters are exactly constructed, and that's the same team they came out with, not even with the fact that Ben Simmons wasn't on the team, wasn't playing in that game. Exclude Ben Simmons, I think just a Kyrie, KD led Nets against the Celtics in a 7-game series, I think the Nets win in 6. I really do. I just think they're a better team. So I told my buddy that. I said, don't get upset about that. I saw a lot of good potential from that Nets game. And I was right, because the following game they played the Hornets, a team that's, let's be honest, the Nets are much better than the Hornets, but the Nets are currently, at the time, they're actually behind the Hornets in the standings. And Kyrie Irving just reminded us all just how great he really is and how great he really can be as he drops 50 points against the Hornets. And it just, once again, though, gets you frustrated. That's the reality of the situation. We all know I defend Kyrie Irving, blah, blah, blah. I talk about it all the time. But there's no doubt, as Nets fans, the amount of frustration that we have with what we see from Kyrie Irving. Because Kyrie Irving just constantly proves to us just how much different this year would have been if he had played every game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't like James Harden. I hated everything about him and so on and so forth. But the one thing that he said, and I 100% agree with, is he said Kyrie's part-time status definitely hurt the Nets. And it did. You see what he did against the Hornets. You see the defense he played against that James Harden and the 76ers. You see how good the Nets can be with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Forget Ben Simmons or anyone else. It just gets you frustrated because you know this season would be completely different if Kyrie was still playing every game. But he's not, so I can't really harp on that much more. But great performance by Kyrie Irving in that game, dropping 50 points. Nets, really, I think they should have won by more than 11. I think it was 11 they won by because they were up by double digits most of the game, 20 by most of the game. But like always, the Nets let the other team get back into it. It is what it is. But the Nets won a very important game against the Hornets and jumped them in the standings, and we're currently the A seed, and currently are the A seed. And then comes the 76ers game, a game that has been hyped up since the trade deadline. The return to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons. We all know he didn't play in the game, but he was there on the bench for the game, which I thought was good. A lot of people have different speculation. Should he even have been there if he wasn't going to play and this and that? I think it was good that he was there. Okay, I think the fact that he showed some face there and just had a presence was good for him. And would it have been better if he played? Absolutely, but he did it. That was kind of the underlying, the storyline going into the game. But it wasn't really the storyline after the game. The storyline after the game was pretty much everything NetsBoy has always thought. That was, A, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are bad, bad, bad men. They reassure us as Net fans that when they need to flip that switch, Kyrie and KD can do it. And it is why, as Net fans, we believe that this Nets team can somehow make a run in the postseason, despite the fact that they'll probably be the 7 or 8 seed and in the play-in tournament. Because we see that when extremely motivated, how these two superstars take their game to the next level. That's the first thing. On the opposite end, it brings out everything I always thought about James Harden, which was this guy shrinks when the stage is the biggest. James Harden, 3 for 17 from the field. I think he had 5 assists and 4 turnovers. He looked terrible. And every time he missed the shot or waved his hands in frustration because he wasn't getting a foul call, I just laughed. And I said, this is exactly what I imagined would happen. And I said this before. I told 76ers fans this. They didn't want to believe me. They don't want to believe me because they're 76ers fans. They're almost as bad as Knicks fans with their delusion. They're almost. Not quite. They're almost. I said, you're going to love James Harden when you first get him. When he first comes to the team, he's going to say all the right things. You're going to see what he can do. But when it matters most, this guy ain't going to show up at all. This guy ain't going to play to the top of his ability because he can't handle it. He just can't. And I don't understand why, because there's nothing that tells me that he should be struggling the way he does. He just does. And until he plays well on the biggest stage, it's the narrative. And I loved what one comment said on the highlights on Facebook. Someone commented, "Oh, looks like playoff James Harden was in full effect last night." Because it's true. James Harden sucks in the playoffs. And James Harden sucked last night. It was so great. I was so happy. I've never been so happy to see a player fail as much as I've seen James Harden fail last night. I love it. Love it. So, look. Everything went well for the Nets last night. 25 from Durant, 24 from Seth Curry, 22 from Kyrie. Nick Claxton, I think, was the unsung hero of that game. For some reason, people aren't giving him as much credit as I feel like he deserves. They all said, Andre Drummond frustrated Embiid, who Embiid, I think, had, 28 points, but it was mostly from the free throw line. I think he was 5 of 16 or 5 of 19 himself. He didn't have a good field goal percentage, but was getting to the line. And everyone's like, Andre Drummond, this is why the Nets brought him there. Andre Drummond didn't really play Joel Embiid that much once he got hurt. Andre Drummond in the first quarter sprained his ankle. He came back in the second half, but he didn't play the rest of that second quarter. And it was Nick Claxton who came in, who just frustrated the crap out of Joel Embiid. He was getting physical with him. He was buying up. He was coming and doing help defense every time that Embiid tried to pass the ball or try to make a play. He just collapsed on him. And I think people are overlooking just how much of a significance factor Nick Claxton's performance was in that game. Granted, the entire Nets played well. Bruce Brown and James Johnson were fantastic on the defensive end, rotating with the help defense and the double teams. That is very true. And they're a big reason why the Nets won. The Nets won this game on their defense, which I talked about before, that the key to this Nets team to win a championship is they've got to get back to their success they had earlier in the year, which was their defense, and they did that in this game. But it's not a coincidence that Nick Claxton was a major factor there. And I think he's one of the unsung heroes of that game. I mean, to hold the 76ers to 100 points and shooting under 42% from the field, it was incredible, and it was all because of the great defensive presence, starting with Nick Claxton. And also Kyrie Irving, who single-handedly said, I want James Harden. And anybody who, once again, says to me, NetsBoy, why do you defend Kyrie Irving? Why do you hate James Harden? Just watch last night's game. Kyrie Irving said, I want James. I'm going to guard James. You all double teams, leave me alone. Me and James, mano a mano. And who won that matchup? Kyrie Irving. Because Kyrie Irving is up here. James Harden is down here. It's just a fact. I'm sorry. It's a fact. I don't care what anyone says. Kyrie Irving, always have him. Always want him on my team. More than James Harden. Fact. So Kyrie Irving's on the ball defense against James Harden, holding Harden to 3 of 17 from the floor. Fantastic. And that is what needed to happen. But I do think it was interesting. There was a couple quotes, both before and after the game, by some of the Nets players that was very interesting. The first one, which I think was great, was, Kyrie Irving, saying, when you boo Ben Simmons, you boo us. Love that. Because obviously the Nets came, they want to try to play for Ben Simmons, and they want to also try to prove to James Harden that he made the biggest mistake of his life asking to be traded. So they came out there and they were aggressive. Kevin Durant, with his great quotes of saying things, well, it's really hard to boo Ben Simmons when you're losing by so much. Love that quote. Then he also said things like, it was kind of weird. I didn't hear that many 76ers fans at the end. I was hearing more Brooklyn Nets fans. Awesome. This is why I love Durant, because he trash talks a little bit. He stays on his team. He defends his players. And look, people always say this. Why do teammates defend Kyrie Irving? Why is everyone always okay with what he does, being a part-time player, not getting vaccinated? He doesn't, he's being selfish. He doesn't, he's hanging his teammates out to dry, and Kevin Durant. Like I just said, that quote I just mentioned earlier, when a player says, if you boo my brother, if you boo my guy, you're booing me. I'll tell you this right now. If that doesn't say, I got your back, Ben Simmons, or I got my teammates back, I don't know what does. And so when people say, I don't know why players want to play with Kyrie because of all the extra stuff, that is why. Because he might have his own opinions of things and his own philosophies that I'm not going to say are right or wrong. But when it comes, honestly, to stepping up and defending his teammates, Kyrie has always been there. Ben Simmons just came to the team. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are saying, we're with Ben. He's on our team. We don't know what happened. We don't care what happened. We got his back. And I love seeing that. And you know what? James Harden couldn't understand that. James Harden, when he was frustrated with what was going on behind the scenes with the Nets, and I've said this before, I guarantee you it was James Harden was upset that he didn't have a voice. He was going to management, going to Durant, saying, hey, come on, Kyrie's got to be full-time. Can we force something here? Can we start these things? Can we play through my way? And when they said, no. This ain't the James Harden show. This is the Brooklyn Nets. And we're going to run the team and make the decisions we want in our brotherhood. Either you're here or you're not. And James Harden, who's supposed to be a team player, he said, nope, I don't like it. Not my way. I'm gone. And that's exactly what happened. I don't care what anyone else says. That's what happened. The minute James Harden knew it wasn't going to be his way, he bolted. Because that's who he is. Kyrie, embrace. KD, embrace. And it was just a great, great win. And another quote I thought was interesting. And this is, once again, jumping on the bashing of the James Harden parade, which I love to do. KD said something really interesting in one of the post-game interviews. He said, when they asked him about the defense the Nets played, he said something I think was really, really, really interesting. He said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, something along the lines like, well, we knew that they were only a 1 or 2 pass team, that they were going to, not move the ball around the perimeter as much, and so we were able to anticipate our double teams well. And once again, that's a paraphrase. If that's not a hidden knock at James Harden, I don't know what is. Because that was one of the other things that people talked about speculation with the Nets and the James Harden trade, is that Steve Nash, Durant, Kyrie, those guys, they wanted the ball to move more. But we all know James Harden is a high-usage player, meaning he needs the ball in his hands for him to be efficient. And James Harden would not move the ball. James Harden wanted to be the offense and run the offense. And I understand why, because James Harden's very good at that. He's very good at being the main ball handler and playing off of him. That's true. But that's not the way the Nets wanted to play. And so when KD says, we knew they were going to make 1 or 2 passes, that's saying we knew the ball wasn't going to move. We knew once James Harden had the ball, he might try to do a pick and roll with Joel Embiid, or maybe try to pass it out to Tobias Harris or take the shot himself. We knew once that happened that they weren't going to move the ball anymore after that, because that's not how they play when James Harden is on the court. And sure enough, that's what we saw. The minute a pick happened and the ball went to Embiid, a collapse. And Embiid tried to make the right plays. Embiid tried. I give lots of respect to Embiid. He did not have a good game, but he tried. He still had 14 rebounds and still did everything in his ability to try to will the 76ers. James Harden, he's just like, psh, not my night. I'm just going to go on the bench and be stupid, because that's what James Harden does. But, I just thought that was a stab at James Harden, and I loved it because it's true. The ball was popping. It's not a coincidence in the 2 wins that the Nets had recently against the Hornets and the 76ers, the Nets had over 30 assists because they move the ball. James Harden doesn't allow that. And I think it kind of played into the Nets' favor. They knew what to expect from James Harden. And that quote from Durant summed it up. So it was so good. A wire-to-wire victory in Philadelphia. James Harden sucked. Great performances by Kyrie and KD and the whole entire Nets team. It was just so delicious. So delicious. But we need to keep things still in perspective as Nets fans. And the Nets need to continue to realize they are still the A seed. They are still, if the season were to end today, in the play-in tournament. And there's only 16 games to go. So the Nets now need to continue to build off of this fantastic 29-point victory and continue to win some games. So now let's take a look at the next couple games for the Nets as we try to see, can they achieve that? So the next game is Sunday against the Knicks in Brooklyn. Knicks coming off a pretty impressive win over the Dallas Mavericks. No Kyrie in that game because it's, in New York City. But look, I think we're at this point now that even without Kyrie, as long as they have Kevin Durant and the rest of the players play well, any team that's not currently a playoff team, I feel like the Nets should win. So the Nets should beat the Knicks. Then they got the Magic in Orlando. That's a Kyrie game. So you got Kyrie and KD, gotta be a win. Then the Mavericks in Brooklyn. This is the only one that kind of scares me because the Mavericks are a top 4 team in the West right now. They're playing really well. Like I said, they did just lose to the Knicks. And there's no Kyrie in that game because, it's in Brooklyn. That one's going to be scary. But once again, I want to believe the Nets can win that game. And then on Friday, they have the Trailblazers, a team that's in complete rebuild right now, in Brooklyn, so no Kyrie. But once again, any team that's not currently a playoff team, as long as they have Kevin Durant, the Nets should win that game. So the next 4 games, I really think the Nets should win all 4. I really do. I'm going to let them slip up once and go 3-1. But remember, 16 games to go. I said the Nets need to get to 45 wins. All right? They're currently at 34 wins, right? I'm forgetting everything now, right? Yeah, they're currently at 34 wins. So they need 11 more wins the last 16 games. Or 15 games. Yeah, 15 games, excuse me. 11 more wins in the last 15 games. I think they can do that. I don't see why they can't do that. 45 wins seems very doable for this team moving forward, especially if they build off of what they have. So there you have it. Great win, a great last couple games for the Nets. Let's see if they can keep moving it forward. Let me know what you guys think about everything. Everything I said about, Kyrie Irving and James Harden and how good the Nets looked. If they can continue to build, if you agree with me that 3-1, nothing worse than 3-1 these next 4 games, and to continue to build for hopefully a shot at the 6th seed. It's a long shot, but they still have a chance. Because Cavs are in a little bit of trouble right now. Jared Allen's hurt. They have a tough schedule coming up. Cavs could very easily go like 6-11. That doesn't add up. 6-9 the last 15 games, and the Nets could go, like I said, 11-4, and that would put the Nets above the Cavs. So that would be a huge situation. So let me know what you guys think about everything. And until then, this is NetsBoy. Laughing at James Harden. And signing off.